Fox News alert and more post-election drama unfolding in the Sunshine State as the ballots in the hotly contested Florida Senate race are now officially being recounted by hand. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm John Scott, in for Bill Hemmer.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith. Broward County missing the machine recount deadline by only 2 minutes, and that did not make the Rick Scott campaign happy. And that brings us to this morning's Newsroom news feed.
There's breaking news out of Florida, where time is up for the battleground state to finish their election count.
Unofficial results indicate the governor's race seems settled, but the U.S. Senate race is headed to a manual recount.
2 Florida counties snaggled with election problems: Palm Beach County and Broward County.
I believe strongly that it wasn't not a human effort, it was mechanical.
Officials say a substantial number of ballots were not counted.
But because of that breakdown in the machines, Senator Nelson tonight suing for a hand recount of all ballots in Palm Beach County.
Bill Nelson has to look in the mirror and ask himself if he would like to end his career dragging the entire state of Florida through the courts for more time.
If you can believe it, the election disaster in Florida just got a little worse, with Broward County missing the deadline to turn in their recount total by just 2 minutes.
They were rejected by the Florida Secretary of State. That means that the official results from the election, the unofficial results, are going to be what stands.
Time out. Broward says they make the deadline. They're all happy that they've finally made the deadline, and then they submit it 2 minutes late past the deadline?
That is exactly what happened.
All day long, Broward was saying, we're going to make the deadline, we're going to make the deadline, and then they miss it by 2 minutes, and it turns out that there was a net gain for Scott. This is, it's kind of nuts. The whole thing is nuts.
A federal judge calling the Florida recount, quote, the laughing stock of the nation for not anticipating these election problems.
Republican Rick Scott crying foul as the accusations and lawsuits continue to fly. Griff Jenkins is live in Lauderhill, Florida. What is the latest there, Griff?
Sandra, good morning. You're not going to believe what I'm going to tell you, but our producer inside, Sarah Shackles, tells us that they could actually be well underway to finishing the Senate hand recount of over 30,000 over-under ballots. What they had to do is they had to sort them in either decidedly Republican, decidedly Democrat, clearly no vote, or in the green go to canvassing board, meaning there was a contest. We'll find out a little bit more. Look inside here at this picture. What they had originally set up was 100 tables. 6 people at each table, 2 election officials at each one, 4 lawyers or representative of lawyers, 2 Republican, 2 Democrat. Now, earlier this morning, Ronna McDaniel, the chairwoman for the RNC, was in there, and I asked her a little bit about her concerns being at Broward County. Here's what she had to say.
There's been so many egregious acts out of Broward County. I wanted to be here for the hand recount today. It's going well today, but we've had to bring in tons of attorneys and be here to make sure that we could oversee this process, that it was done fairly.
So we will see if it is an eventful day, but look here, we do have one race. That governor's race appears to certainly be coming to an end, and that is Ron DeSantis leading Andrew Gillum by more than 33,000 votes in the recount. That's a 0.41% difference, and we expect by Tuesday the state of Florida will certify Governor Ron DeSantis. Sandra?
Griff Jenkins, thank you. For more on all of this, let's bring in our headliner, Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House and a Fox News contributor. Speaker, thank you for joining us this morning. What is going on in Florida?
You almost couldn't make it up if you were writing a novel. This is the second time that Broward County has been a total disaster. And every time you turn around, there's something weird going on. I mean, how do you... I almost feel sad for him. How do you miss a deadline by 2 minutes? I mean, you miss it by 2 hours or 5 hours, but 2 minutes? So the whole thing is a fiasco. I think Rick Scott will be the senator. The numbers are much bigger than have ever been changed in a recount in American history. So I think in the end he's going to be the senator. But it really makes the whole process of elections in Florida obviously need a significant overhaul, and in particular in 3 counties. I mean, most of the state seems to get it, and most of the state seems to do their job calmly, efficiently. But in those 3 counties, there's just consistently a mess, and I hope that the new governor and the new attorney general are going to take steps, along with the Secretary of State, to clean it up before the presidential election in 2020.
If Broward had met that deadline yesterday, Rick Scott would have gained a machine-certified vote count of nearly 800 votes. He doesn't automatically get that now because they missed the deadline. Does that surprise you?
Well, the whole thing's a mess. I mean, look, that's the county where you'd figure if there was something going on that he would have been losing ground. Instead, they do the recount. He gains 800 votes, which I certainly couldn't have predicted. And I was with Karl Rove on Saturday, who, of course, was deeply involved in 2000. And I don't think Karl would have imagined either that you actually have a recount in that county where the Republican gains 800 votes. But it just further indicates that Scott's going to be the next senator, and that in that sense we're now going to go through some mechanical stuff. But I think the underlying reality is that Governor Scott will become Senator Scott.
Meanwhile, a job you know well, Speaker of the House, will Nancy Pelosi get the support she wants and needs to win her bid?
Oh, if I were betting, I would say yes. Speaker Pelosi is very smart. She's very tough. She's raised an immense amount of money. She's crisscrossed the country helping candidates. And she's probably going to have to go through negotiating. And, you know, for example, I know that the more radical members want to reestablish a committee on global warming. Well, that may be part of getting their votes for her for Speaker. But if you're the potential Speaker, you have a lot of tools, a lot of assets you can bring to bear. And my guess is in the end that she will be the Speaker. But it's also an indication that caucus is going to be very hard to manage. She's going to have a very challenging time trying to lead the opposition to President Trump.
That's what I was going to ask you about. I mean, you know that it's a case of herding cats, but in her case, she's going to have some extremely liberal members of her caucus that she's going to have to try to wrangle votes from.
Yeah, it's a little bit like having some wild cats as well as regular cats. So you have some left-wing cats, and you have some common-sense cats, and you have older cats who wonder why the younger cats are making so much noise, which was apparently a conversation yesterday. But, you know, I think Kevin McCarthy, the new Republican leader, said it pretty well. The country ultimately is going to want them to find a way to work together. I think the president is going to come out with positive things, whether it's criminal justice reform, the opioid bill that just passed overwhelmingly, or infrastructure. And I think that there will be a real effort to put the Democrats in a position where, unless they really want to go into the election in 20 as the party of obstruction, you are going to see some things pass. And it may turn out to be more productive than people think. If that happens, you'll see the Democrats split into two wings, and there'll be a hardline, don't do anything positive group who have as their only goal beating Trump, and then there'll be a more moderate group saying, no, we ought to try to get some things passed. I think it could be a very interesting House to watch.
Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi is using the opportunity to have the spotlight on her to take sort of a victory lap, if you will, talking about all the negative ads that were run against her during the midterm process and how it turned out so well for them.
I had 137,000 ads against me in the campaign. That put some, shall we say, pressure on our candidates because I've never run for national office, so most people don't even know who I am. It makes it hard on the candidates, and here they're running for the first time, many of them, and they really need to focus on their why. And it's not about me, it's about them and their opponent, and obviously those ads didn't work. We have the biggest victory since 1974.
An awfully confident sounding Nancy Pelosi there.
Well, let me say, first of all, I had the same experience. We had not won re-election since 1928. And so in 1995, President Clinton and the Democrats began running wave after wave of ads attacking me. But the experience we had, which may be what she had, it actually took the pressure off of my colleagues because they weren't getting the ads run against them. They were running against me, and I wasn't on the ballot except in the 6th District of Georgia. And we did end up winning re-election despite all that advertising. So in that sense, I think she can make a case. But the real test here is going to be, what can they get done? Do they become purely the party of investigation, or do they reach out? Remember, when we took over, even though we were the opposition party, we reformed welfare, we reformed Medicare, we cut the capital gains tax, we balanced the federal budget for 4 straight years. And the reason we were able to establish a long-term Republican majority is we actually were doing things, even though we were doing them with Bill Clinton, so it was genuinely bipartisan. She's going to face the same challenge. Does she want to really just be negative, or is she going to have to be creative and find some way to bring her caucus with her and get some positive things done? I think that's really the biggest decision she'll have to make in the next 30 or 40 days. Because
members of her caucus, like Maxine Waters and Gerald Nadler, who are going to head up important committees in the House under this new Democratic-led regime, they are saying that they intend to, subpoena the White House and begin investigative procedures. You don't think that will help them with the American people?
Well, it didn't help us. We went through a big investigation of Bill Clinton and ended up losing 5 seats in 1998, because ultimately the American people want to see you get something done. Now, again, look, I'm very much for congressional oversight. I believe in the balance between the different branches, and I think it's totally legitimate to do serious oversight. But, for example, if they try to subpoena all of the president's personal tax records, that'll just lead to the Supreme Court. I mean, that's going to get tied up in court so fast that nothing will be happening. And the real question is, I expect them to do some investigating. They should do some investigating. But does that become the brand that they carry into the election? I mean, if all you have is an obstructionist investigating Democratic Party, I think that's a very weak brand to take into the presidential campaign. And as I said, when we were in charge, very first time in 40 years, our first instinct was, what can we get done?
Right.
And I think that the president will be open to significant, for example, in infrastructure, bipartisanship.
And he has said that he is, so we'll see where that goes. Former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich joining us as our headliner this morning. Thank you, sir.
Next hour, we'll get a Democratic perspective on the upcoming speaker's race. Pennsylvania Congressman Matt Cartwright joins us to talk about who he supports to lead the U.S. House.
Well, a horrific scene unfolding in California at this moment as fire crews work to help bring the wildfire situation under control. 63 people confirmed dead statewide, more than 600 still missing. In a moment, we will speak to the Butte County Sheriff on the recovery efforts in one of the hardest hit towns.
Also, a crisis unfolding at the southern border as 2,000 migrants already have reached the border as part of this latest caravan wave. The White House calling on Congress to act. Later this hour, we'll speak with the Border Patrol. Are our agents getting the support they need from Washington?
The president has made clear he wants people to come here legally. There's a process in place. Do it. There are 26 ports of entry. Enter them. $1.6 billion is a modest down payment for the security of this nation.
A Fox News alert on fires raging up and down California, claiming at least 66 lives so far. The list of missing people spiking to more than 600. The Northern California Camp Fire now becoming the worst U.S. fire in more than 100 years. Joining us on the phone now is the Butte County Sheriff, Corey Honey. Paradise is in this county. Of course, that is one of the hardest hit areas. You came on with us several days ago, Corey, to give us an update. Where do things stand at this moment in your county?
Well, from the briefings I received for fire, they're making good progress on the fire, and that's good news for us. In addition to that, there's been a lot of great work done by the utility companies and other folks who are working to get the place safe so that we can start the process of getting people back into the area to assess the damage and see what's going on with their homes. I'm still actively engaged in the aspect of trying to recover human remains, and that's something we brought a lot of resources in to help us do as thoroughly as possible under the circumstances, but as quickly as possible, because we know we have to get people back into the area.
You've got a staggering number of missing people, more than 600. Is there any possibility that most or all of those people are somewhere in the rubble?
Well, first off, I want to clarify the list that we put out, we're characterizing as unaccounted for, people who are unaccounted for. What we have found is that in the chaos of all of this, people lost connection with their friends and family, and they were scattered to different areas of the community. We're now at the point where they're starting to try to locate those people, but the normal methods of keeping in contact with everyone have been disrupted. So what we're finding is that someone may have been reported as unaccounted for, and when we put that information out to the public, we get information back that they're safe. We continue to investigate if we don't get that information, but to the answer to your question, I've been refused to speculate on the number of casualties. I just don't think it's appropriate. We're going to continue to do our absolute best to locate people and reunite them with their friends and family, but at the same time, search the area for people who perished in the fire.
Sheriff Honey, then do you have an update on the number of people unaccounted for? Is it less than 600 now?
I don't have an update from last night. What I typically do is get one update per day from my staff because the number fluctuates as more information comes in. Some people are accounted for and they are taken off the list, and others might be reported as unaccounted for. I also am very cognizant about bothering my staff with those kinds of requests because I want them to keep doing the work, and so I limit that to one time per day.
Understood.
The challenges of communication, I mean, talk about that. You talk about people who are unaccounted for. They had to leave, sometimes with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Sometimes they don't have a place to go to, right? And it's just hard at this moment for people to be in touch with one another.
It is. You can imagine all of the things you take for granted, your landline phone, your email, your cell phone, all those kinds of things. In many cases, that's all been disrupted. And anecdotally, I heard a story about a person who was speaking with an elderly parent, and they were trying to communicate with the parent, and she said, well, I'll just email you. We can log into your email. And because he lost his computer in the fire, and just he said, well, I've lost my email. And he doesn't, we're trying to get him access to his email through another computer, but you can see how disrupting it is and how confusing it is for people if they're really used to one method of communication, and that's lost.
Sheriff, can you give us an idea of some of this video that we're looking back at of rescue efforts and those that are helping searching through the rubble, what the process is like right now?
Yeah, so we've actually mobilized a significant number of resources, both through the California law enforcement mutual aid system, where we brought in coroner and medical examiner investigative teams, as well as urban search and rescue teams and California National Guardsmen to go through those areas. We first look at those areas where we have some information to believe that human remains might be. We then target areas where we think there's a higher probability. And then last, we utilize the vast number of resources we have to generally check the area to try to determine whether or not we can find somebody who may have been away from their home or outside of the area.
If Americans are looking for a way to help, and, Americans are big-hearted people, what would you suggest?
You broke up. I'm sorry. What was that last part?
What would you suggest? How can our viewers help the people of your county?
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I will say that Americans are big-hearted people. We're resilient people, and I see that in my own community. I'm constantly amazed at how many people, having suffered significant tragedy, are thankful that they're still alive, and they're resilient, and I'm just so proud of them. There's a lot of opportunities for people to send financial resources. It's harder to send actual items because it's hard to get them out deployed. I would ask that people investigate thoroughly who they're sending the money to, so that make sure that it gets to the people who actually need it. But I'll leave that to the viewers to make that selection.
Butte County Sheriff Corey Honey, thank you for your time this morning. You have a huge task at hand, and our best to the people of your community as the search and rescue efforts continue and the rebuilding efforts will begin. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate you helping us tell the story.
Thank you. Well, the long arm of the law might finally be catching up with WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Why there are new reports that the U.S. Justice Department might be charging him. We'll take you live with the latest.
Plus, Nancy Pelosi could be facing an uphill climb in her bid to be House Speaker as the Democrats joust for power in the House. Our A-team is fired up. They are on deck. They join us next.
I intend to win the speakership with Democratic votes. If that was your question, I have overwhelming support in my caucus.
All right, we are just now getting some breaking news on the ruling on that CNN lawsuit against White House reporter Jim Acosta from CNN. The White House revoked his press pass, you'll remember, and a judge is ruling in favor of Jim Acosta and CNN. And the judge there is saying that the fact that CNN has other pass holders does not make the harm to Acosta any less irreparable. The judge is saying that the whole thing about Acosta placing the hands on the intern was of questionable accuracy. The judge also went on to criticize the government's defense of its procedures in revoking Acosta's press pass. I'm looking down because this is just coming in to our newsroom right here. The federal judge, Timothy Kelly, in this case, says, quote, I will grant the application for the temporary restraining order. I order the government reinstate Jim Acosta's press pass. So the hearing is still ongoing, but that, of course, just coming down, and we wanted to make sure that we brought that to you.
Fox News had joined CNN in protesting the administration's actions on freedom of the press grounds. And so now the judge is saying that he will grant the application for a temporary restraining order, forcing the White House, in effect, to give Jim Acosta his press pass back. The hearing is still ongoing, as Sandra mentioned, saying that the harm to freedom of the press outweighs the government's need for an orderly press conference. So that seems to be the judge's main thinking as to why he's granting Jim Acosta and CNN his White House pass back.
All right, so the judge has ordered that the White House return the press pass of Jim Acosta. This just coming into our newsroom. As we get more on this, we will bring that to you. Meanwhile, a hand recount getting underway in the Florida Senate race. Here's a live look at Broward County, where officials failed to meet a 3 p.m. deadline yesterday. That caused the results of a machine recount to then be voided. Republican Rick Scott still leading Democratic incumbent Bill Nelson. We will have much more on this in our next hour with Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi. She'll join us live.
But first, let's bring in America's A-team. Shelby Holliday is video reporter for the Wall Street Journal. David Asman, a familiar face, co-anchor of Bulls and Bears on the Fox Business Network. And Doug Schoen, Democratic pollster and a Fox News contributor as well.
Doug, is it your first time on the A-team here?
It is, and I'm pleased to be here.
Unbelievable.
Thank you.
First of many.
Happy Friday.
I hope so.
All right, so get us started here. I mean, this has been really something to watch play out. We were all talking about this deadline yesterday, 3 p.m., and then 2 minutes late.
Well, where I sort of start from, it's about a 12,000 vote lead. The chance that any recount, whether it be by machine or hand, is going to overturn that is really pretty limited. And to me, Sandra, the larger goal of the credibility of our elections is, to me, really at stake yet again. And I hope that the hand count goes expeditiously. I suspect it will confirm Rick Scott. And I'd like us to move on and maybe even look to trying to get some systematic overhaul of Palm Beach County and Broward County's counting process.
Amen on that. I mean, you know, when enough coincidences, first of all, I'm not a big believer in coincidences anyway, but when all the coincidences add up to one conclusion, you have to be kind of suspicious. And the fact that that Brenda Snipes, the woman who was responsible for the electronic recount, just said, okay, we're going to make it. But then it turns out that, in fact, Scott, the Republican, had 779 more votes as a result of the recount than before. And then she managed to be 2 minutes late, so the electronic recount didn't count, and he lost those 779 votes that they'd picked up. I mean, it's just, even if it's all just incompetence, it would be a tremendous coincidence. And it also shows how badly the government does it. This is a woman who, if she was in the private sector, would have been fired years ago. Imagine if the government gets hold of more of what we do.
Well, Ronna McDaniel, the chairwoman of the Republican Party, is down there sort of looking over the shoulders of those who are doing the counting. She says that it is very important that they get this right and changes need to be made. Listen.
Changes need to be made, not just in Broward, but in Palm Beach, because this is not good for our country. It's not good for our democracy to not have these totals put forward and not have county supervisors abiding by the law.
I mean, that's about the one thing that's uniting Democrats and Republicans alike. Both sides are embarrassed. Both say it needs to be better. At this point, the recount is not recounting every single ballot, thankfully, because you have these exhausted elections officials counting ballots over and over 24 hours on end. They're going to be looking at the overvotes and undervotes. But what's interesting here is they're going to be judging intent. So you guys showed that ballot earlier where you had one fully circled and one kind of circled. And now election officials have to look at that and decide what that vote means. That is not an easy task.
Well, there's an op-ed on the Hill on this by historian Alan Lichtman, and he writes this. The headline, Florida has chance to redeem itself. Florida officials must examine impartially and with utmost care the intent of voters on each voted ballot rejected in the machine count. Republicans should embrace such intense scrutiny of voter intent, Doug.
Yeah, I'm fine for that. I think both Shelby and David are saying what I was really trying to underscore. We need a transparent count. And I think if you do this honestly and with integrity, as was done in every other county, and Miami-Dade did it pretty expeditiously, I think we will all win. And what Ronna McDaniel was saying, I think, reflects all of our views.
It's such a disservice, though, what happened yesterday. It's such a disservice to all the people that have been working
over,
not only them, but the election officials that were there day and night over the past 10 days trying to do this electoral recount or an electronic recount. And all of that work was for nothing because she was 2 minutes late because I suspect she was worried about Scott picking up more votes.
Speaking of votes and vote counting, Nancy Pelosi obviously wants to become Speaker of the House once again. Listen to what she had to say about her prospects.
Say to everybody, come on in, the water's warm. I have overwhelming support in my caucus to be Speaker of the House. And certainly we have many, many people in our caucus who could serve in this capacity. I happen to think that at this point, I'm the best person.
I guess, you know, of course she thinks
let's
she's
go
the
around
best
the table here and just, will she be or won't she be? Will she be the next speaker?
It's not a done deal yet. And the Wall Street Journal's been reporting that Representative Marcia Fudge might step in and might have some support. So it's unclear. There are about 20 Democrats who've said they won't support her. A vote against her is much different than a vote present. Which doesn't necessarily count against her, but I don't think it's a done deal.
Maybe I should say, do you want her to be?
The answer is a most assertive and unabashed, no, I don't. I worked for Bill Clinton. He was reelected in '96 in large part because of the unpopularity of Newt Gingrich. Donald Trump's best outcome here is her reelection. I'm for Marcia Fudge. I think it would be a great idea to have a young, progressive African-American woman as Speaker. I think that enhances the party. It allows us to, frankly, do what needs to be done, pull the party together, do a reassessment of our message, and get rid of the old guard of which Nancy Pelosi is the most prominent representative.
I agree she's old guard. She's definitely old school, but she works very hard for her party, and let's give her credit. I mean, she helped them win back the House. So I think as long as she's clear about term limiting herself when she really gets it back into that position, she says, I'm only here for a year, 2 years, whatever it it happens to be. I think she makes it.
All right, David, I want to stay with you on this one because we've just gotten this breaking news, and this judge has now ruled that the White House must immediately return the press credentials of CNN's Jim Acosta. I want to get your thoughts as we continue to learn more out of that courtroom.
Well, first of all, I think it's not at all a done deal. This will probably go to the Supreme Court. I mean, this is a key issue of separation of powers, whether the judiciary has the right to tell the executive how to run its own press office. I mean, it may, if it rises, if there's some interpretation of the First Amendment that would transcend any kind of individual rights that the executive has to decide who gets in and who gets out, I do think it'll go to a higher court.
There are a limited number of seats in the White House press room, the Brady briefing room, 44 seats, I think, something like that. So the White House does have an argument that they get to limit who is in there, but do you get to limit somebody just because?
Well, I think what could also be problematic.
Hang on just a second. The lawyers for CNN are coming out, and let's listen in.
Great day for the First Amendment in journalism. We're very excited to have Mr. Acosta be able to go back and get his hard pass and report the news about the White House. I'll turn it over to Jim.
Okay. Everybody, thanks for coming. I just want to say something very briefly, and that is I want to thank all of my colleagues in the press who supported us this week. And I want to thank the judge for the decision he made today. And let's go back to work. Thank you.
When do you expect to get
whether or not we think the likelihood should there be
If you are a little befuddled as to what this is all about, there was a White House press conference right after the election during which the president was speaking. Jim Acosta from CNN got in a very heated exchange with him. A White House intern tried to take away the microphone, and there was a little bit of an altercation. The White House said that he actually placed his hands on the intern. That's open to interpretation. Some saw it as such. Some say it was overblown. But the White House pulled his press pass. Now he's getting it back, according to this ruling from a federal judge.
And you'll remember that Fox News came out in support of CNN. Passes for working White House journalists should never be weaponized. A little bit more about what we're learning here in this judge. Judge Kelly ordering the government to return the press pass of Jim Acosta. Our reporter, Jake Gibson, telling us that both sides will submit a written status report by Monday, and we may see this in court again next week if the government wants to continue the fight. But for now, the temporary restraining order has been granted by Judge Kelly, and he ordered the government to return Acosta's hard pass. Want to get your thoughts?
Well, again, it's a question of how much the White House wants to push this. If I think it would make a very interesting Supreme Court case to see whether the First Amendment goes far enough so that they can order the White House to decide who gets a press pass and who doesn't. They may decide to just say, the heck with it. We made our point. The world has seen what Acosta did, and we'll give back the press pass. Let's hope that this thing doesn't go on much longer, because I don't think America has the stomach for either one side or the other necessarily in this issue.
But I'm just reading headlines as it's breaking, but this is a Trump-appointed judge. It's an emergency stay, so as we've been saying, it's far from over. This is not the end of it. But I do think what could be problematic for the administration, if they choose to fight it, is the reaction, the aftermath of taking Acosta's press pass away. Some of the comments the president made seemed to indicate that he took his press pass away because he didn't like the questions, he didn't like the coverage. But originally, the White House said it was about that kerfluffle with the microphone. So that could be problematic.
My attitude is, looking above this, let's move on to the real issues facing our country. I mean, I think he ought to go back to work.
The press covering the president that's real issues.
It is the real issue. But what happened with him, the intern, what Trump said, frankly, that's inside baseball to me as the only non-journalist here. I'm much more concerned that we address the real issues, the trade embargo, the debt, the deficit, health care, immigration. Rather talk about those than Jim Acosta, frankly.
Our A-team today. Doug Schoen, David, first timer Doug Schoen.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
David Asman, Shelby Holiday.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks to each of you.
Thank you. A lot of breaking news coming in this hour, as well as Senator Lindsey Graham saying that its acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker personally assured him that Robert Mueller's job is not in jeopardy. Is that enough to appease Democrats calling for Whitaker to recuse himself? We're going to ask that of Sean Spicer. He will join us live next hour.
Right now, about 2,000 Central American migrants arriving in the Mexican border city of Tijuana. The shelters there dealing with overcrowding, while U.S. border agents work to process about 100 asylum claims a day. This as the White House renews its call for a border wall.
Clear for 3.5 years now, and it helped him to win the presidency indeed, is that we are a sovereign nation in need of physical borders. And I don't know if there's anything that he's been more explicit and consistent on in the last 3.5 years. Congress needs to act.
Art Del Cueto is a Border Patrol agent in Tucson and vice president of the National Border Patrol Council. Not your sector, Tijuana, I guess, but 2,000 people waiting to get into this country. How does the Border Patrol handle that?
Well, the sector would be San Diego. The problem is, you know, they're on standby and they're just waiting to see what these individuals are going to do. There's been a lot of video that we've seen that has been put out on certain segments of social media where it shows these individuals have climbed into the United States. They've mocked Border Patrol agents. They've been saying some derogatory things towards the United States, towards Border Patrol agents, towards our president. This is not migrants coming into the country. This is nothing short of an invasion.
Wow.
So obviously there are many who will push back on that, and that these are people who are making this trek, what is seen as a very dangerous long trek, to look for a better life. What do you know about the people? You're obviously talking about them as a group. What more can you tell us is you are seeing as far as their activity and the way they have been acting along the way?
You know, what's amazing is there's a lot of things that have not been pushed out to certain areas of the media, but you can see them on social media. There's individuals that have been filming themselves down in Mexico. The Mexican people themselves, the majority of them have said that they don't want them down there in their country, and they've showed the disasters that they have left behind, trash that they have left behind. You know, it's just, they're not asking for asylum in all the interviews that I have seen. What they're saying is they want to come and get a job. So what are they running away from? You know, if you're running away from some type of persecution, I fully understand that. You know, we're not a nation that's going to turn away people that are persecuted and need help. I am just saying that these individuals are entering a country by force, and the videos that I have seen, they're mocking our agency, they're mocking our country, and it does not seem like they're asylum seekers. It looks a lot more like invaders to me.
FoxNews.com did a story on what's going on in Arizona, in your sector, in the Yuma sector. It says agents in the Yuma sector said they detained 654 people, most reportedly being family units or unaccompanied minors from Guatemala. CBP said apprehensions in the Yuma sector are up more than 150% compared to the last fiscal year at this time. More than 3,600 people were apprehended in the month of October. It does seem like there is a wave trying to get into the country.
There definitely is a wave, and honestly, we can attribute it to that we're still doing the catch and release. We're not giving these people true consequences for entering our country illegally. I believe there's ways that it can be done a lot better. We can have FEMA trailers down there at the border. We can look and see which are true asylum cases and which are not. And at the same time, we can fast track some of these people that are being deported. Because you got to remember, the law is very specific. On a deportation, you still can't detain them longer than a certain period of time. You have to pretty much release them and wait and hope that they show up to their court appearance.
Obviously, the very little information that we do have on these migrants is why you have that pushback on calling this an invasion. We still have a lot more to learn as this caravan continues to make its way to the border. Obviously, we're all watching it, and the president continues to push for funding for his border wall, potentially facing a shutdown or a partial government shutdown. I know you're trying to jump in there. We've got to let you go. We've had a lot of breaking news this hour. Art, thank you.
Thank you.
Brand new reports coming in showing that the U.S. is planning to bring charges against Julian Assange. So could the WikiLeaks founder be extradited? WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is reportedly facing possible prosecution by the U.S. Justice Department. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live in Washington with this story. Catherine, good morning.
Well, thanks, Sandra. The disclosure about the head of WikiLeaks is buried in this unrelated terrorism case filed in the Eastern District of Virginia August 8th. A counterterrorism researcher at George Washington University was first to stumble across two references to Julian Assange about the need to keep an indictment secret, what the court calls under seal. Quote, due to the sophistication of the defendant and the publicity surrounding the case, no other procedure is likely to keep confidential the fact that Assange has been charged. The proposed order would need to remain sealed until Assange is arrested. Julian Assange remains at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, unable to leave for fear of arrest and prosecution. It's not clear what the charges may be, but WikiLeaks has been under scrutiny since 2010 with the release of 750,000 classified State Department cables, and more recently the release of DNC and Clinton campaign emails during the 2016 election. After the election, then CIA Director Mike Pompeo accused WikiLeaks of high crimes, including espionage.
WikiLeaks walks like a hostile intelligence service and talks like a hostile intelligence service. It has encouraged its followers to find jobs at the CIA in order to obtain intelligence. It's time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really is: a non-state hostile intelligence service, often abetted by state actors like Russia.
Assange's attorney said, we have heard nothing from authorities suggesting that a criminal case against Mr. Assange is imminent. Prosecuting someone for publishing truthful information would set a terrible and dangerous precedent. We know through our ongoing reporting that the Obama administration considered charges but was cautious about whether Assange and WikiLeaks amounted to a news organization. But the Trump administration, as you know, has taken a more aggressive tone. Sandra.
Catherine Herridge, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, a hand recount underway now as ballot chaos once again hits the Sunshine State, and the lawsuits are piling up. Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi joins us top of the hour.